have I had an opportunity like this to handle, to examine, to understand why this rifle of all things exists in our hobby. This rifle remains, in my opinion, the rarest bullpup AEG in all of Airsoft. Its silhouette may be familiar to some people out there, but to others it gets passed off as a FAMAS. I can understand why, but even this Chinese rifle was rushed together more than the French's soon-to-be dismissed attempt at modernization. And I can show you why with this replica. A replica built over 10 years ago that can still put many newer high-end Airsoft AEGs to shame. This is the Real Sword Type 97. July 1st, 1997, Chinese forces successfully reoccupy Hong Kong, ending 156 years of British colonial rule. This was planned quite strategically, down to even the appearance of the People's Liberation Army, or PLA's weapons, as to not seem outdated, as they were going to be recorded and photographed during the reoccupation. Gone with the AK platform and in with the new sleek and futuristic rifle. This rifle would be dubbed the QBZ-95, chambered in a new and native round, the 5.8 by 42mm. However, this rifle was clearly rushed to make deadlines. This can be seen a little later in this review. The QBZ-95 and its entire family of variants would be reworked and seen again in 2012. The Type 97 that we'll be talking about replicates the 5.56 civilianized version of the QBZ-95 that was produced by Norinco. The Type 97 is banned for importation to the United States. However, it's a relatively cheap firearm in Canada and can be had for less than $1,000 US. That is quite a deal, even in Canada, as long as you don't mind the 5-round magazine restrictions that Canada is known for. You can guarantee that if it was legal to import the real Type 97 into the United States, and it could be had for the same sub $1,000 price point, that I would buy one immediately. Focusing on the Airsoft replica that we have here today, I first have to thank the Far East Tactical Group for supplying both of these rifles. I normally don't take in viewer guns, but for this review, it was an opportunity that I could not deny. Please feel free to take a look at the Far East Tactical Group with the links provided in the description, which will include their YouTube channel where you can see them in action with their proper Chinese kits. I don't think anyone else in the United States takes their Chinese-inspired loadouts, training, and tactics as serious as they do. They know much more than I will ever over the Real Sword Type 97 and everything else in between, as they've researched them and used them for many years now. They even share blueprints for 3D printable parts like this front grip and interesting carry handle / top rail. Again, a big thank you goes to them. Moving into this review, where we always begin, we'll start with the unboxing. This starts off nicely with a creative display all over the standard cardboard box, showing off what model is inside. But even if these two boxes were the same size, you'd have to be blind to confuse these two. Opening up both boxes, I can show you how airsoft guns should be packaged. The dense surrounding foam holds onto these replicas so well that if you try to pull the Type 97 right away, everything else comes out of the box as one piece. The more complete of these two boxes would be the Type 97Bs. I'd still be missing the enormous instructional book and colored poster from both boxes. Leave it to Real Sword to not just include an instructional sheet, but a whole damn book to read. Despite the old school tube and rod speed loader that was already out of date when these rifles released, Real Sword demanded some more respect by including this plastic oil can. But no, there's not a single drop of oil inside of it, and there never was. Then there's a proper steel 7-piece cleaning rod, a front side adjustment tool, and a push pin tool inside this tube. Of course, I discourage you from actually using this steel cleaning rod on your replica, as you'll dramatically damage your inner barrel, but this being included into this package is a nice piece of realism. Then finally, we have a 130 round steel M4 mid-cap magazine wrapped in an oil paper bag. I haven't even removed these rifles from their foam coffins and can already feel some of the quality with this hammer of a magazine. It's still plastic on top like normal, but the steel outer body and trademarks look great. Coming in at 29 inches and 24 inches for the Type 97B, the Real Sword Type 97s are completely constructed from steel and the proper polymer that would be found on the real rifles, with the lower receiver being forged from aluminum. But skipping a little ahead here, I can say that things like the flippable rear sight take a lot of pressure to flip. The quick change spring system requires you to take the rifle down to a point where the top of the gearbox is completely exposed. There's just going to be a lot of stuff to talk about in this review, but let me make this clear. This is not the best M4 alternative out there, but more stand out than the rarer STANAG accepting bullpups like the F2000, L85 family, or the PDRC. This is a rifle that is so rare in the state of Texas that I'm only aware of one other standard Type 97, and the owner, named Teddy, doesn't have any plans to sell his. It's also heavier, or about the same weight, as some of those other bullpups despite how skinny the Type 97 seems. At the end of the barrel on the more standard Type 97 that is roughly the same length as a full-sized M16, we have a unique steel flash hider. I love the fact that this wasn't replaced on the Airsoft models with a standard birdcage flash hider to save a couple bucks. RealSword wanted to do it right, and they put the correct flash hider on this rifle as well as on the Type 97B. A plastic orange flash hider would come with these rifles when they shipped into the United States, but the proper steel device would be as well. So you'll almost never see these with an orange tip unless an owner received the model from the last two batches before RealSword first discontinued the Type 97. As I'm told by Toby of the Far East Tactical Group, RealSword stopped including the all-steel flash hider. Those rifles only came with the plastic orange flash hider instead. Both of these rifles came with standard 14mm counterclockwise threads at the end of their barrels under their respective muzzle devices, but only the Type 97B will require you to pull back on this rather stiff pin so its larger and rather ugly device can be screwed off. From here, the standard Type 97 and B model differ for a while. The standard Type 97 bears a bayonet lug near the rear of the exposed outer barrel with the realistic adjustable gas regulator behind it. This can be adjusted easily with a 223 or 5.56 round if you'd like to mess with it, but it does nothing to the replica in any way. It's just for some added realism, which I appreciate. The Type 97B has a much easier to use regulator that you can play around with as long as you want, but you'll have to push in this tab along the front sight. Again, this does nothing to affect your Airsoft replica, but I appreciate the time that went into this because RealSword didn't need to do this at all. As for the sights, well, that's where the first of many problems can be discovered about the QBZ95 and not with the RealSword replica itself. You have to realize that some elements were a bit rushed and not spent too much money on to produce, and since this is, for all intents and purposes, as real as the real thing gets, you get some pretty awful sights on both of these rifles. The rear sight just seems to disappear too easily, while the front sight on both rifles stands out clearly. The front sight is adjustable for windage and elevation on both rifles, just like how the rear sight is adjustable for nothing. The rear sight doesn't offer you anything to adjust on either rifles besides what aperture to use. The rear sight, with a little bit of force, can spin a full 360 degrees, and so on. You're also offered 3 sizes of pinhole options, as well as a post sight, but all of these seem to do much the same. It's more of a matter of opinion, of which poison you don't mind taking, but you could bypass this altogether with a proprietary rail you could sometimes find online. These rail mounts are pretty rare now, but can be had for about $30 as long as the person selling it isn't upcharging due to collectability. This will solve a lot of problems, but you'll be adding more height to the already higher than normal height over bore that these rifles offer. The last major difference with these two rifles would be the handguard, and the differences are clear. The Type 97B looks a bit more tactical with an added vertical grip. This is molded into the handguard as well as a molded thumb rest that isn't exactly useful for anyone being left-handed. Interestingly enough, this is just a large plastic molded piece that contains the trigger that more or less acts as a lever that pulls onto a trigger bar, which looks exactly like the real trigger bar that the QBZ and Type 97 NSR rifle uses. I wouldn't be surprised at all if this is a real part that's just been modded to work with this replica. The handguards do come off these rifles very easily after pulling out this non-captive steel pin, which you'll have to do to connect your battery to the small Type Tamiya connections. As you can see, this standard Type 97 has been converted to use Dean's batteries that run to an aftermarket gate nano hard MOSFET that ensures that this rifle cannot double cycle thanks to active braking. This saves the trigger contacts, but of course, this is an add-on and not something you'll get with the stock Real Sword Type 97. These rifles were meant to use smaller nickel metal hydride batteries that were made specifically for the Type 97 due to the compactness of the battery space. But 7.4 lipos can also work with this aging design without having to worry about internal problems. Just remember that a stock Real Sword Type 97 shouldn't be used with 11.1 lipo. The motor is just not designed for that kind of power, and you'll ultimately get heating issues and even double cycles on semi, which I found to be true on both of these rifles. And if several owners of Type 97s on the Far East Tactical Group say so, then I'm going to believe them. With the right size battery, you could either lay it along the barrel inside the handguard or put it inside the pistol grip where the tool set should go inside. It's completely hollow in here but very compact, so you might want to test different batteries and see what will work the best for you. Taking all these plastic body pieces off for a moment by pushing out this last captive pin in the back and sliding off the top covers, you'll get the bare bones and the gearbox. The plastic, you may have noticed, is pretty thin and bendy. Even with the Type 97 all together, you can feel it bend and shift all around in every direction, just like the real rifle. That would be because these parts are real. There's no replicating here. These are real body parts from a real Type 97. I did notice that the recoil buffer has been removed, but besides that, I think that all these plastic body parts could be interchanged with the real Type 97 if you really needed to. Inside the gearbox, you'll find the bevel and spur gear are version 6 and version 7 compatible. The sector gear is special in that the cutoff cam and tappet stub is mirrored to those of a regular version 6. Stock gear ratio is 21.7 to 1, making overcycle an issue with modern motors. The cylinder head is specifically offset and made of polycarbonate, but the tappet plate is a little weak due to the space limitations. All of this sits in a strong and well-crafted shell with high-quality bearings helping spin. Putting all the plastic parts on the thick forged aluminum receiver and hooking the handguard back into place, which doesn't help with how loud this rifle is when you fire it anyway, I can show off the last two horribly placed controls on this rifle. These placements are not the fault of Real Sword, but with the QBZ-95 itself, that were corrected on the QBZ-95-1. But first, let me quote Ian of Forgotten Weapons. In general, what we have here is a reasonably effective rifle in all ways, but an exceptional rifle in no ways. Introducing probably the worst placement for a fire selector switch ever. Being so far back, just about 2 inches away from the thick rubber butt pad, you get a really awkward setup that does not lead to quick selections at all. You get safe, semi, and full auto like you'd imagine, but with the steel dial that demands you memorize it so you don't look idiotic when facing off against enemies. And the magazine release isn't much better either. Unlike the Tavor or an F2000 or even an L85, you get this insignificant button that can be passed off as just another push pin on the right side along the rear of the magwell. This makes for more awkward movements when using this rifle, as all possible ways to reload this rifle look terrible and feel terrible, much like how the trigger feels. Any person familiar with firearms knows the legend of long, mushy, and uncomfortable trigger pulls on bullpup rifles, and this rifle has that feeling. There's no way around it either due to the design of the trigger bar setup. All four of these factors, including the iron sights, makes that quote from Ian the definition of the Type 97. This is a rifle with some of the most unique looks, a rifle that seems like a piece of the future, or from a romantic zombie movie called Warm Bodies. This is a rifle that makes the PLA seem mysterious, but when you get past the stigma, you see that this rifle was not thought out properly at all. Even as an Airsoft replica, it's outmatched by almost everything in its weapons class, bullpup or not. I like that the sling points are made from steel and shouldn't ever make you worry about lugging these rifles around or even throwing them on your shoulder in a hurry, but I don't like the tiny space you get to make adjustments to your hop-up. This is made even worse when you try to do a rewire so you can add in a MOSFET, or if your gloves are too thick to get into this small space. But you know what? I still love these rifles. Both of these rifles have been on the top of my wish list for years. The craftsmanship that went into these replicas is outstanding. Hands down, no doubt about it. It's not fair to match these rifles to today's offerings, both in the real world and in the airsoft realm. The Type 97 isn't even ambidextrous in controls, besides the charging handle that does nothing important as an AG. And even if you pair airsoft bullpups against this rifle, Well, these things can still reach out past 150 feet with 0.28 grams pretty damn easily. For their age, these rifles still pack a punch, and I love that. All real sword guns were built at least 8 years ago, meaning that most likely there's a bit of rust inside your inner barrel that has to be cleaned out if you're not actively maintaining a replica like you should. And knowing that, if you're maintaining your AEG, what's better than having people look at that strange thing that you brought out to the field and having it outrange many of the modern guns that everyone else is using? These rifles aren't CQB ready at all, and the rate of fire is pretty weak with a 7.4 LiPo battery in comparison to what we have now. But this isn't a high-speed type of weapon. The Real Sword Type 97 is a rifle that you bring to simulate, show off, or to admire. It's not meant to compete in speed QB matches or to be hacked up into a dreadful DMR setup. This rifle is on the list of most realistic airsoft guns that an AEG can possibly be, made from several real parts. A rifle that's so good that, legend has it, the Chinese military purchased many of these for their own training, which greatly dried up the stock of 2,000 standard Type 97s. Even fewer B models were produced, but I'm not sure as to how many were taken in by the PLA. Real Sword teased more members of their QBZ line at IWA 2011 that you can enjoy thanks to SCAR 8T. A link will be provided in the description for this video. I have no idea what I'd expect the LMG variant to sell for, since these two rifles can sell for about $600 to $750 and up. I would expect that just a drum mag for this thing would be valued at over $100, only if the long-range rifle and LMG were released in 2011 like they planned. It's the little things that make me adore this rifle and Real Sword as a company. The small numbers on the gas regulator, the serial number, the almost entirely steel build including the barrel, the forged aluminum lower receiver, the real plastic parts that weren't strengthened for convenience. Although it lacks in many ways with the controls, its magazine compatibility, its iron sights, the battery restrictions, it still sits as a legendary piece of Airsoft's history. A piece from a legendary manufacturer. A piece that's being made once more by Real Sword but may never actually be allowed to leave China due to a possible expired firearms license. A replica that a lot of people wish was either a replica of the QBZ-95 or just gas blowback instead. This is one of the most unique bullpups you'll ever see in Airsoft. This is the Real Sword Type 97.
We have shown these automatic electric guns to you last year and they're still not released yet. Why? We have no idea. Well, let's hope they will be released soon. According to Airsoft, they may be released about June. So let's hope it's true this time.
Once again, I want to thank the Far East Tactical Group for sending me both of these rifles so I could properly make this review. I've had these for several months now, so it's time that I send this Type 97 back to its owner in California. I want to thank Toby Zhang and everyone else from the Far East Tactical Group who made this happen. Links to their social medias will be left down below in the description, as well as several links to other reviews and information about the Type 97 from Jarek 4, Deathcore Airsoft, Epic Airsoft HD, Red Wolf Airsoft, Splinter Cell, Airsoftology, and Ian McCollum of Forgotten Weapons, who explained the history of the QBZ and Type 97, as well as shot the real firearm while in Canada. I would also like to thank everyone who asked for this review and donated to USAirsoft through Super Chats from November to December. You all give me the drive to put together more videos, and I enjoy every single minute of it. But until that next video drops from the city of San Antonio, this has been Scott Hollenbeck, and I'll be sure to see you all next time.
Anything? Yeah. Very far back, watch that.
It does not like KWA magazines.
Fast.
Alright, along the right. Oh, he's down.
If you're on the other side of the circuit, you are dead.